I'll introduce the folks, and then we'll get into some questions, and then you're welcome to ask some questions towards the end. So let me move from left, my left over here to right. Joe Carter is down at the end down there, your left. Joe graduated in 2018. Use the microphone, yeah, that's better? Okay, thank you. Joe graduated in 2018. He was part of the first special topics class that we had for supply chain management. Did a project with Caterpillar, a wonderful project. Maybe it helped him, we'll ask this question, maybe it helped him in the positions that he's taken then after graduation. He played some football here, was a linebacker. He was also attended our big ISM conference in the spring of 2018. Worked the conference in Nashville. It was a wonderful time. Right? We'll talk about that maybe another time. But now Joe works for Circana. Before that, he worked for St. Southeast Grocers Association. Yes. So he's in that industry or that kind of field. We'll talk about that when we get into some of our questions. So Joe's from Jacksonville, Florida originally, and still lives in Jacksonville now. And back there, he's studying for a Master's of Science in Industrial and Systems Engineering. I might ask about that too. How that is. So Joe, thank you for coming back. Yes, yes. Next to Joe is John Abey. John graduated in 19. John also took the special topics class in supply chain management. And we were talking earlier is probably ECU Health that you work with, right? Some inventory and warehousing issues that they talked about and worked on. After graduation, went to work for Southeast Industrial Equipment in Eastern North Carolina, or in Eastern North Carolina. Went on to Best Logistics in Kernersville, and then is currently working for out of the Winston-Salem office for Best, right? Salem. Atlantic Packaging. And we'll get to that. And we say all these things because it's where they're from, but it's also interesting the progression and how they got to where they are, right, in their career. Maybe we'll hear today about some of the decisions they made and switching jobs and so forth. What's funny about John, I didn't mention this outside, but I got to read the names for the supply chain management majors at graduation that spring of 19. And we stood right out here, and we will experience this, is you stand and get in alphabetical order. So I had these cards, and I'm looking at these cards and trying to figure out each person's name, and there's, 40 people that I'm supposed to name. And I'm going down the line, I start at the back, and I'm working my way to the front, and I get to John, and he goes, you think you're gonna be able to pronounce my name? And I said, John, that's my name. And I'm a little bit nervous at that time. And he goes, last name? And I said, A-B. He says, yeah, just write it down, A-B. And I'm looking at him going, throttle you right now. I got to make sure I say all the names right, but you did make it easy. But it was funny. We were standing right out here. I remember that story from that story. And everything went well. It was John A. So, Caitlin Keeley, break is next. She graduated from our supply chain program in 2012. She basically took what we call back then logistics and materials management class, which we call now purchasing and materials management. So things have changed a bit over time. We have a dedicated now logistics class. Some of you supply chain management majors know that, right? Caitlin currently works for Primo Water, water dispenser side of the business in supply or supply manager. But before that, I think your first job out, Caitlin, was with AP Exhaust, right? At AP Exhaust in Goldsboro, and they make aftermarket exhaust. I mean, literally welding metal together, busy place. You were there 2, 3, maybe more years. 2 years? Yeah, as a scheduler. Yep. And then from there, I believe you moved on to Butterball. Yeah, is that right? Yeah. So, and then from there, I think Primo, or was there V-Shape? Was that in there for a little bit? Okay, short question, right. But again, why do I say this is because career steps and moving, and we'll talk a little bit about that in the session. So, finally then Madison, at the end here. Madison is a recent grad. She graduated in spring. And she was an officer in the ISM, or ISCM club. She took the topics course just this last spring, and their project was with Hyster Yale, and now she works for Hyster Yale. So we'll talk about that maybe a little bit too. She attended, as an officer, she attended the ISM conference this last spring. She also attended one of the other conferences called STAFTA in the fall of last year. So she was well traveled and saw all kinds of good things at conferences, and it pays to be a officer in the ISCM. Okay. So those are our folks that are here today. I'm so grateful that they came back and they answered my emails and agreed then to come back. So maybe someday I will be emailing some of you all to say, hey, please come back and tell us a little story. So what I wanted to do today is just open up the conversation and ask, kind of start basic and ask some questions like, how did you figure out that you might like supply chain management? How did you end up becoming a supply chain management major? So let's start. Joe, go ahead, and if you have, we'll give you the mic.
So, yeah, when I came to ECU, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I don't think I declared until the end of my sophomore year. But I decided to go the supply chain route because I wanted to be like my older brother. My older brother was actually working with Caterpillar at Morgan at the time. And went to go visit him, family and I, and got to tour the facility there, and it was just really cool seeing all these massive parts that were going to go on this industrial equipment moving around this huge facility. And it seemed to me to be a perfect balance between something that was technical and something that could foster the soft skills of business. So that's why I chose supply chain. Yeah.
Thank you. John?
Yeah. Similar to Joe, I had no clue what I wanted to do when I came to ECU. But I did know I didn't want to sit behind a desk. So I know supply chain kind of opens you up to multiple opportunities, whether it's sales, production, purchasing, whatever the case may be. I just knew coming in, if I picked a major like accounting, I'd be kind of limited to accounting, or healthcare, be limited to healthcare. I just knew supply chain was broad and brought a lot of opportunities, and that's why it just worked out for me.
Thank you.
I have always known that I wanted to do supply chain. My dad was director of logistics, so I grew up hearing about his stories about work, everything about logistics and production. It's always very interesting. There's always something new going on. So that's really what I liked about supply chain, was it's not just the same thing over and over again. There's always something new happening.
So I originally started ECU as a hospitality management major. I worked in customer service related jobs since I was 14, food service more specifically. And it was my first year at ECU, and I was at my serving job. And I just kind of snapped one day. I was like, I love people, I love working in a business, but I can't do business to consumer sales. I wanted more business to business. And so I just started researching different majors that could lead you to jobs where you're working more corporate life. There's a little bit more at stake when you're working in a large company compared to dealing with $14 steaks. And supply chain kind of checked all those boxes. There's a lot of room for flexibility. You could do beginning manufacturing, production, aftermarket sales. There's just so many different facets with supply chain, and I started taking supply chain classes, and that's what I really wanted to do.
Thank you all. Excellent. And we'll circle back around to that idea of how you got into supply chain. But the next question, I think you all think about this, and I believe you do, because I know when I was an undergrad, I thought about this, is I gotta go to all these classes. I gotta learn all this stuff. Am I ever gonna use this again, right? Well, first, yes, it's gonna be on the exam, right? Then you say, am I ever gonna use this stuff again? So I wanna ask the panelists, were there things that you took away, hard skills and soft skills, from not only ECU, but specifically College of Business and supply chain, that has, I guess, helped you in your job, your careers, and advanced you? So think about that idea. Any hard skills, soft skills that you took over?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question. Honestly, I feel like all of my core classes in supply chain really related to what I do now. Granted, I've been working full-time for 5 months. So all of my purchasing classes, logistics, they've all kind of tied in what I do in my day-to-day. I work in purchasing. So I handle purchasing parts for the lift trucks at Hyster-Yale, and I deal with a lot of suppliers and a lot of distributors, and understanding their processes, along with understanding our company's processes. Those classes really help with that, getting the core concept of why we're doing what we're doing. Also, just the College of Business in general, networking. That was like the biggest thing, learning how to professionally socialize with people. And I'm sure you've heard it and you're going to continue to hear it. It's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. And that's very, very important in school and work.
I'll say the biggest thing that I learned at ECU was Excel skills. That's something that I've used. Excel is my life. So those like starting skills, learning VLOOKUPs and pivot tables and things like that has been very, very important to me, all the jobs that I've had.
I have to say, I agree with Madison completely. I mean, it's not, not always what you know. It is a lot about who you know. And, you guys are in school now. The biggest thing I can say and take away is work hard, because when you get out in your professional life, if you want something, you're going to have to work for it. And it's getting more competitive every day. I mean, the biggest thing, too, is ECU taught me how to get out of my comfort zone. I had a core group of friends that I always hung around with and, spent time with, and we went to these events and didn't leave each other's side. But the biggest thing is get out, network, meet people, find groups that you may not normally socialize with, and those people could take you places or introduce you to people later down the road.
Pay attention in class, coming out of school, looking for a job. Those companies are going to expect a return on investment when they hire you. So the skills you learn, keep it broad, like all of them, we're going to use, okay? If I was to pick out a few, I'd say number one, presenting, get comfortable in front of people. Don't be afraid to speak your mind, but certainly weigh your words. And then just knowing how to think, learning how to write, learning how to speak. Those are lifelong skills. That's kind of the baseline. I know it seems pretty simple, but if you can't do those things, work is going to be pretty difficult. Companies are hiring you to get your take and to get your opinion on how a company should solve problems. So they're expecting that. And then in addition, like the technical skills, Excel. Pay attention in Dr. Velasquez's class. I use VLOOKUP every day. Pivot tables, index match all the time. And I would say that's baseline. Maybe go out of your way to learn something like R that's open, or Python. Maybe take a SQL course. It's something's offered here at the school. All these companies, they're data driven. Just get comfortable in the data. And if you're taking any classes of linear algebra, pay attention. If you can understand that, you're gonna bring more to the table. Yeah, pay close attention. I think 1066 is differential calculus and linear algebra. Pay attention.
Thank you. All of you, very good. And I'll say, I think for the record, is I don't think Joe offered anything to Dr. Velasquez to say those nice things. He's sitting in the back. You might have experienced this class, and if you haven't, please take it. It's just wonderful. I'm not paying anything either. But it's good to hear. Well, and that's, in a sense, when I ask these questions, it's kind of the things I want to draw out. Is what did you learn here? What did you take away? What are the things that you use every day that help you in your job? So, and I tell you, they're not lying, right? They aren't. So, let me ask this. So, there's kind of two areas that I want to go, and I'll go the first one this way. Is that so? In your career right now, what you're doing right now, maybe we could talk a little bit about challenges, areas that you see that are difficult or more challenging than others, and then also, are there any trends that you see in your area of expertise that you might see coming, or you say, ooh, if I don't, or as like you said, Joe, if I don't maybe learn this programming language, or if I don't do X, or I don't, as many brothers say, is if I don't keep my eye on the ball, I'm going to fall behind because other people are doing this. So maybe any challenges that you have, and or then any trends that you may see in the supply chain area in the field.
So I don't work directly, I would say, in the supply chain field. My company, Shirkana, we do CPG and retail market share data and shopper data. So we're not moving physical widgets, but we are moving data through data factory, data pipelines, and pushing it out to our customers. And a lot of these supply chain principles apply. But working more so in the tech space things, the pace of change is insane. So as I alluded to earlier, like learning those technical skills is really going to be beneficial as you just go through the change and add more value, because something might come up with your company. Hey, we got this problem. No one has this skill set. Well, it's actually, hey, I actually went out of my way to learn this technical skill, and let me give it a try. So I would say prepare yourself technically, and I think that will certainly help with some of the challenges you see. So.
Yeah, I would say some of the biggest challenges in the packaging space mainly is kind of setting yourself apart. So being in sales, you're always looking at having an edge, or why would you go with me over my competition? And the biggest thing Atlantic is focusing on right now is reducing single-use plastic. So sustainability is a big drive for us. We like to think that we're leading the industry. California actually now is starting to introduce some laws that will go into effect, I think 2029, where suppliers or companies that are selling products in this packaging will sell a fine, or will pay a fine every time an item's sold. So you start to accumulate a lot of those fines. They will add up. So sustainability is a big thing for us. It's certainly the way of the future, and I think if you could get a grasp on it now and had any interest later down the road in life to get into packaging, that would certainly give you a leg up.
I don't have a very good answer for this. So challenges, there are a lot of logistical challenges right now. There was the port shutting down on the East Coast that has affected a lot of the product that we bring in on the West Coast. So with my job, I do a lot of what we do comes from China, a lot of our products. So working internationally with people in different time zones, that's challenging. Getting it brought in at the right time. There's Chinese New Year coming up that affects production shutdown for at least 2 or 3 weeks. That is a big challenge to try to schedule around. There's a potential tariff increase this year, so there's a lot of things that change a lot. I guess that is a good challenge, is things are always changing. But,
yeah, I agree with Caitlin. I've never really kept up with news until I started working full time, because things like port strikes actually affect my job. I work as kind of a liaison between suppliers and the company. So when the port strike came up, we were contacting all of our suppliers. Hey, are you going to be affected? If so, like let's get the product that's going by ship, get it going right now. It doesn't matter what it costs. You kind of just have to learn to be flexible, and that was definitely something that I'm still learning and kind of finding creative solutions, because people are open to new things. Also, cost reductions. We are constantly going back and forth on pricing with suppliers and kind of figuring out ways to mitigate increases when they pull all the time. They're still pulling out COVID inflation. COVID was a couple years ago, but it's still being used right now, unfortunately, as an excuse for things like that. And just looking for value add opportunities, and the list goes on and on. So just having that creative mindset in the workspace is a really important skill to have.
No, wonderful. I was glad the answer was right on. Is it? And I guess it's one of the things in supply chain is that it is almost ever changing, and it's a new challenge every day. I learned that when I was in industry. I guess I was naive when I went in. I thought a little bit like, we'll get this plan, we'll make this plan, and it'll just run. And we can put it on automatic and things will go fine. It felt for 3 or 4 days, right? So because of things like port strikes or price increases or delays with lead times or all kinds of things that can happen. So that was a little bit about your career now. What I'd like to maybe pivot to is the idea that I remember two big manufacturers that I worked for when I was in industry. And one of the things that I found challenging the first time this happened was to write that first resignation letter, right? To give them 2 weeks and say, I'm out. Okay? Now, on the record, I was never let go. I was never fired. Just for the record. At least from those two jobs. But this is a difficult thing, and I heard, right? I asked my father, I asked people at the university. I went back to my old professor and said, well, how do you do this? And they're like, you just need to do it once, and you need to understand that it's a partnership, and you're maybe letting them go as much as they might let you go. Where I'm going with this is, other than medicine, folks have been in different positions already, and it's cliche. It's not like it used to be. You go work for IBM or you go work for auto manufacturer for 30 years of your life and retire, and everything's good. Already a number of different positions for each of the folks up here. So I guess as I'm going to ask that question, like, and Madison, you can answer however you like, is if you're looking, is the idea that you might always be looking for something. So maybe comment a little bit on any of your positions that you have, like, I left, or this company, why did I change my career? Why did I change the path? Why did I move from one company to another? And speak a little bit to that, because I think we get that first job, as I said, and we're happy, and it's wonderful we get that first job, and then either things may not go so well, or you say, I'm out of this, I'm not growing in this company, or you see something on the horizon that says they're not changing enough for me. So we'll start with Joe down here, and maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that, Joe.
So, looking back at my career, I think the first job is the hardest. I was telling Madison that earlier. You're kind of moving from an environment where you're a senior, you're kind of at the top of the dominance hierarchy within your domain, and now you're going out into the real world and you're on the bottom. And there's a lot of, I think, emotions and things that come along with that, and you're learning new skills, and it's difficult. So as you come into that first job, like, don't let your confidence get rattled, and if it's not working out, know that you're not stuck. You have your whole career ahead of you. My first job was with Southeastern Grocers. I was working in procurement, sourcing private label non-food goods like Publix brand aluminum foil, but in this case it was Winn-Dixie brand aluminum foil. And spent about 2 years in that role, and I got to do some things with data, which I just kind of was drawn to and enjoyed. I felt like I was pretty good at it. I wanted to do something more in that space, so I got to know some folks at what used to be called IRI, now it's Circana, but it was IRI, and it's a testament to networking. There were some folks in the building working for IRI, supporting them. I got to know them, and a position opened up, and spoke with them, and but that was one reason. And you shouldn't be shy about that. Like, your the business is going to move forward with or without you. I think it is good to carry kind of a company man or company woman brand along with you, but don't get too caught up in that, because things are going to move on without you, and they're going to be okay. And just pay attention to the people who are around you. It's really important, I think, young in your career, to have a manager who is looking out for your best interests. And I think that's why I've been able to accelerate my career in a short amount of time. Is when I came to IRI after that first job, I really had a manager who was mentoring me, rather than just managing, saw potential and advocated for me. So if you find that, I would stick around.
Yeah, I have to agree, and I think it's important too, as you get out and you get your first job, you got to find a balance. So, you get into something, whether it's a hobby, whatever you're doing now, to be good at something, it takes time. So as you get your first job, I've switched jobs twice. I try to do the 2 to 3 year mark. Obviously, that's kind of going away. There's nothing wrong with switching jobs, but I do think it's important to give yourself some time as you get into a role, and do it on the front end. When you're interviewing with these companies, ask some questions that ask about culture and work-life balance and all these things, and you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And it took me a few years of experience to actually understand that. If you don't think you could go hang out with somebody, or if you don't think you could go grab a beer with somebody, they're probably not somebody that you want to work for or work with. Now that's not to say that's all different types of industries. Being in sales, it's different. Everyone you run into is typically either personable or you can relate to, and if there's not that, it's hard to justify. So I wouldn't be scared coming out, having a first job, doing it a couple years, and switching. I do think though, if you get into situations where you're switching every 3 or every 6 months, there could be some questions raised. So just keep that in the back of your mind.
You said to give the job a chance. I think that it's also important to give the company a chance. If you're in a position that you don't like, there could be options within the company. When I was at Butterball, there was a job that I didn't want to do anymore. I didn't like what I was doing before, but there were other options within the company that I could move to, and that's what I did. So I think it's also helpful if you're already in the company. Is there anything else in there that's open that would be interesting to you?
I can't really speak on job change situations because I'm not there quite yet, and I hope to not be there for a while. But I can speak on starting out a full-time job. It was an absolute culture shock. I went from having 3-4 classes a week, and I worked part-time, to now I'm working 40 hours a week, and I'm maintaining a social life and spending time with my family, and then I have everything else I need to do, and it is such a change in your daily lifestyle, and then also, you're learning a new role. And I personally feel a lot of pressure on myself. When I first started, I was trying to be perfect. I was trying to get everything done. As soon as a problem was presented to me, I wanted an answer. I wanted to get that person an answer immediately. But I really learned to give myself grace because I'm new to the company. I'm new to their systems. I didn't know who I could and couldn't go to for different topics yet. And it's just, it still is a big learning curve. So when you do get to the point where you start a new full-time position, give yourself grace and know that the person that chose to bring you into that company, they brought you in for a reason because they see potential in you, and you're going to get there.
Thank you all. Those were excellent answers, and thank you, Madison, for that. Is the idea of mentors, the idea of as much as you're going into the relationship with them, they're going into a relationship with you. I found the same things when I was in industry and I switched jobs. I had a number of good mentors, and possibly why I came back to academia is the one mentor that I had at the last job I worked at, he left and he went to go work for a different company, and I was lost. And that's a whole other story with the supply chain majors you'll hear someday in class. But it is important, and things happen at times, right? It could be changes in life, it could be that you need to move, it could be that your spouse or your partner moves somewhere and you have to move. So keep all that in mind, because I know we're running really fast to graduate and get that first position, and then we get in there and we say, wow, okay, this is working, but what now? What's in the future? So we've got about 15 minutes left. I'd gladly go to questions if we have some questions from folks that you'd like to ask. I'll bring the microphone to you if you just raise your hand, and I'll absolutely, and then I'll kind of come back. Taylor.
So you mentioned something about tariffs. With the new potential tariff coming after this possible election, or after this election, the possibility of a tariff coming, does that force you to look at more American-made products and more American companies, or does outsourcing from places like China, is that still cheaper even after the tariff?
No, we wouldn't look at anything US. I think that would just increase the prices that we have. One change that we are talking about making is bringing in products sooner, trying to get ahead of the tariff increase, trying to bring it in before that hits. But then there are downsides to that. We're paying more for the warehouse costs and to keep all the inventory in hand that you normally wouldn't. But just the industry that we're in, I don't think that there are a lot of US manufacturers that make what we buy and what we sell. So we were just kind of try to work around it and try to see what we can do with it.
I'll just add to that. I think in my industry, you're never really going to compete with China on pricing. But the big deal is, a lot of the stuff that's coming overseas, you either prepay it before it gets here, and you got to think, all this product sitting on container ships for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. Salt water can creep into those containers. So I think there's pros and cons to the tariffs. Obviously, we want to keep jobs in the U.S. You see a lot of companies now are moving to Mexico, kind of that Juarez area. I mean, if you look down there, there's so many household names that you thought made in America are now in Mexico. So I think there is pros and cons, but I do think in my world, China is its own beast. I think it's super price competitive, but I think you're also paying for what you get.
Just for what I've seen so far, the parts that I work in purchasing with, a lot of them are sourced in the U.S., but we do have like electronic components that we get parts from China. We're not looking at changing who we purchase from unless a cost savings opportunity comes up, but it's not as simple as that. You still have to go through, it's called a PPAP process, where the parts have to go through engineering, quality inspection, they have to meet our specifications. So it's not always just about cost, it's about different factors such as quantities and lead times, and if those parts are even good enough to be put on our lift trucks. So there's a lot of varying factors, but parts that we do source from China, we're not looking to resource.
Thank you all. Anyone else? Just Chloe. You got that right. We just met.
Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm a freshman here at East Carolina, and I'm majoring in finance. And my question is, how do you think that new technology and advancements in AI will change the supply chain industry, and how do you think it will affect future jobs?
So earlier I talked about how the pace of change is pretty intense. I think you see it across all the industries, not just in the technology space. And a lot of that is because of AI. I know within my company, AI has raised a lot of questions, or not even questions or concerns, but just opportunity within the competitive space. Like if we don't get up and running with an AI tool or an AI product, we're going to fall behind. So we need to get going on that and invest. I know some companies are very open to using AI platforms to assist in their roles to make employees more productive. So it's like, rather than me kind of formulating this email to a client explaining what's going on, like ChatGPT, here's what I want, give me an email and I'll send it off. At my company, we're not allowed to do any of that because of data governance practices. We don't want anything coming from our clients just being put in the AI ether, and we don't know exactly what's going on. In terms of supply chain, I would think it's pretty similar from a change perspective. How that impacts you as prospects, job prospects. But I would say get familiar with it. I wouldn't be too concerned about losing your jobs. I think the biggest impact to job loss as a result from AI is going to be in the tech space with developers and engineers. Personally, writing a script gives you a script. I don't need 10 engineers now, I just need 5. Supply chain, the good thing about it, it's so broad, it's so complex. I just don't think those large language models are going to be at a point in time, anytime soon, to manage all of that. So.
Real quick, I agree with you. I think it'll all be industry specific though on what jobs could potentially be replaced. I mean, you look at the port shutdown now. Well, a lot of that's stemming from a contract that they wanted to sign saying our jobs are safe from AI or I guess you could say automation. You look at the Long Beach port. It's people sitting in a control room, controlling these container handlers. So I think it'll be industry specific, but I'm also a firm believer in people do business with people. So you'll never be able to replace the human aspect of walking in somewhere, shaking somebody's hand. But I also think there is certain things that we could benefit from having AI or technology in the workforce. But I think it's very, very specific.
So we currently utilize AI at the plants with certain materials that we do infills for, so that helps in that aspect. We still have issues though, unfortunately. We'll get a report saying that we have 150 pieces on hand. We go check the actual bin, we have none, and now the line's down. And now you have to get 3 or 4 people from 3 or 4 different teams and the suppliers or the distributors and say, hey, we need these. So we're never going to lose the need for people in the supply chain industry, in my opinion. Also, again, what John said, you can't be going and shaking someone's hand, going out with a supplier to dinner and building a relationship with them, so that in turn, you get what you might need for the company and they'll also get what they need. And then you just have an overall fantastic relationship with them, and it's like, scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. Right? No.
Thank you. Got a little bit of time. Let me go back here and come up here, right?
When it comes to changing in your job, when do you kind of understand, hey, it's time to cut the cord and move on? And then in that aspect, what was the most difficult part of changing jobs?
It's kind of corny, but I heard a quote one time, and it basically said, if you're not earning or learning, it's time to move on. So if you're not earning, let's say, what you want to make, or your life isn't what you want it to be, and there's some financial stress there, maybe that's a way to look at it. But also too, if you're just at a job and you're showing up every day doing the same thing 9 to 5, you're going to be miserable. You got to find some way to progress, or to start a new project, or to learn some new skill. I know it's a pretty corny saying, but I will say too, quitting sucks. Turning in a resignation letter is not fun. And I think the biggest thing for me on my first one was I cared more about what my employer thought versus how I felt. So you always kind of have in the back of your mind, well, I'm leaving these people, but you always got to consider yourself. And if you're not happy and you know it's time to make a change, then you just got to come to terms with yourself and make that change.
I would say only you can answer that question, but I would say, always aim to leave on good terms. You never know what's going to pop up in the future, and it should be hard to leave the company. Like if it's easy, it's in a bad spot. Maybe your reputation's impacted a little bit, whether it's your fault or not. So if you're in a spot where I think I want to make a change, it's supposed to hurt a little bit. It shouldn't. So.
Always make sure that you've tried your best too, that you've done everything that you can at the company. Like when I was switching jobs, I made sure that I was explaining all of the projects I've worked on, all the processes that I've improved, why I think that I deserve to get a raise. So I think that I made sure that I did everything that I could to explain myself and try to help myself at that job. But when it wasn't received the way I wanted it to, I knew that was time to let go.
And I'll say this too, quitting sucks, but firing someone is far worse.
Hey, thank you guys for coming out today. Excuse me, I had a question about continued learning. So I know, Joe, you talked a little about learning a coding language, but what have you all found most valuable, like post-graduation learning about different book recommendations or courses you've taken, or journals you keep up with?
So when I was between my first company and my second company, I took some low-cost, I think it was like $50 a month on Coursera, just on Python and SQL, just to sharpen the skills a little bit. So that helped a little. In terms of books, controversial guy. I think Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. I think every young person benefits from it. I'll give it a read.
I haven't done this yet, but this is in the plan that I worked with my manager, is working to get my CPSN, which is Certified Professional in Supply Management. That's something that on your resume you add after your name, so Madison May, CPSN. And that is something that you take 4 different exams. It takes probably about half a year to complete. And then you have to have 5 years of job experience. So if I were to take all the exams tomorrow and pass them all, I still have to work in supply chain for 5 years minimum. So I think that's something to, if you pursue a career in supply chain, talk with your manager about that, and I think that's a really good opportunity, plus get a better salary grade.
Well, excellent answers, thank you so much. Just to kind of segue, Madison's right on, and it's a plug for supply chain, but really a plug for any other industry, is seek out what the certifications are in your field. Or, now, let me ask you, Madison, is probably Jason Brown, your supervisor, said, hey, that's the one we'd like you to take. I'm assuming they pay for it. Right. And there's a training course or a prep course for it, and it does actually get you more money. Also makes you more marketable elsewhere. You're kind of in a special group then. There's other certifications within supply chain that you can get from different organizations depending on what the flavor is. CPSM tends to be, I think, a little more on the purchasing side, procurement side. Yeah, so, but I know finance has their own, accounting has their own, management has their own, MIS has their own, marketing, so forth. So, we're just about out of time, I believe. But I did one more question, if you all don't mind staying. Yeah.
I would just
You can't afford it.
So I'm an accounting and finance major. Do you think that by having those majors could correlate with anything that you guys do, or like if I could get in the field at all?
Certainly, I don't think you're limited to what your major is. There's always going to be companies out there that'll take chances on people, and I think, you know, if you're easily presentable and likable, it doesn't matter what your major is, and it certainly doesn't matter what your major is after your first or second job. You know, 2 jobs, and now on my 3rd, I didn't even get asked for a resume at my last 2. I mean, they want experience, you know, they want to sit down with somebody who can have a conversation or knows what they're talking about. So I wouldn't get caught up or concerned about, you know, what your major is now, more so, you know, later down in life, if you want to make a change, I think you absolutely can.
I think finance and accounting is a great major. Math is the language of business, and then, you know, finance and accounting is the context. I think the higher up you go, the closer you get to the balance sheet, which is really important. Yeah, but great major. Yeah, awesome.
All right. We're out of time. I want to thank you all for coming. Please stop by my office. Go by Dr. Velasquez's office. He will gladly talk to you about Excel. Dr. Kirchhoff is here. Dr. Robbins is here. All the wonderful professors. If you're interested in supply chain and being serious, though, contact me. I will gladly speak with you about it, tell you where we need to go or where you need to go, or give you any information. Thank you so much, Joe and John and Caitlin and Madison. Thank you all.